positions. So we like newsletter topics. We also like having you come in and present every other meeting. And then we just want to make sure we're supporting everybody that's impacted through change, and so that way they can be successful. And again, our purpose is we are agnostic as change management professionals. We're here to learn from each other, build our knowledge, and then inspire and lead through the change. This public sector work has a lot of nuances and specialties. And so the more we learn from each other, the more we can improve in our different areas. And we just want to be successful. So we already kind of did our jokes, our purpose, and our welcome. We'll talk about the PSCP board. We do have a position available for that. And then Keely and Aaron are going to talk about understanding change saturation and how to build resiliency. And we'll go through Q&A, and we'll do some closing remarks and some information sharing as well. So again, Michelle and Jamie are actually in an on-site workshop, and I believe Doug and Corey are also in one as well. So you are stuck with me, and Patricia volunteered to support me. So I appreciate you all being here today. And I mentioned that we have a board opening. We actually have the production lead position that's available. So they're going to help out with recruiting speakers, kind of managing the schedule potential for those webinars, that we've got our information up to date. So we're sharing the recording with Corey to get posted, etc. And then just helping the presenters get used to Google Meet technology, provide any feedback on presentations that may be important, and then just kind of that always continuous improvement for our webinars as we go through 2025. So if you are interested in a position or wanting to get involved in the PSCP board in any way, feel free to email us at info@publicsectorchangepractitioners.org. Tell us why you're interested in joining the board, if that position or something else you think would be appropriate, and then just kind of give us your favorite thing about change management, and we'll go from there. And you may have seen in our LinkedIn group that we, in our LinkedIn group and in the feed, that we posted that for 2025, our goal is to become a nonprofit organization. So we're working on pursuing our 501c3. We've been in existence since 2017, when our founders kind of created this grassroots organization as a passion idea for the state of Colorado. And even now, we have a very vibrant community of practice. We have that change management in the public sector focus. And so we have a variety of webinars that we've created over 7 years that are available on our website as resources to those in this area. And so we want to pursue this nonprofit organization status to further our public sector change practitioner activities, improving our content and who we have access to, just making sure that we're a really good resource for everybody in the public sector for this. And so in order to do all the paperwork and get sorted with that nonprofit status, we are hoping to raise $2,000 by the end of the first quarter. You can scan the QR code or go to the GoFundMe link, and I believe Patricia also put that in the chat. $5 for a cup of coffee. If you're finding benefit in this community practice, we'd appreciate your support, because a lot of the board members, founders, and our friends have helped support us through like our website domain hosting, our email, just kind of organizing everything, paying for mailbox, setting up the bank account, all those kind of things. So we'd really like to have your support as a community practice, and we hope that you will support us in the future for 2025. And a reminder, if you are in need of your PDUs as a project manager, we will post a survey link at the end of the meeting, so then that way you can fill that out and get your documentation ready. So if you're kind of wrapping that up for the end of the year, if you're getting your renewal coming up, that way it will be provided. So just a reminder to be on the lookout for that so you can get your PDUs. And again, we would love for your involvement as a community practice member. You can present with us in future webinars. Feel free to share articles, ask questions in our LinkedIn group. You can also complete our survey to provide feedback so we can figure out like what topics are relevant for 2025. And then always ask questions, since we're learning from each other. We're learning from our experts as well as when they're presenting, and we just want to hear from you. So thank you, Keely and Aaron. We are so excited that you're here today as people and change practitioner consultants. And I love that you said that you're fixers and change makers. Like, you understand this world, and you're working in public sector. So we're really excited to have you here to talk about change saturation and building resiliency. And as I mentioned, they are people and change manager consultants at Propeller Consulting. They have extensive experience in change management, strategic alignment, executive communications, and they are seasoned change leaders with a focus on responding empathetically to managing large-scale change, engaging the employees, building meaningful relationships, communicating strategically, and delivering change that lasts. Now, ladies, you may share your screen as I try to figure out how to get out of this. Give me 1 second.
No worries. Thank you for having us here today. Very excited to kind of kick things off, to kind of hopefully people will start to see my screen now. But to kind of kick things off, again, my name is Keely Middleton. I've been doing change management for over a decade now, largely with clients across the industry and area, with a big focus on public sector. And again, always focused on how do we kind of take care of our people, take care of our stakeholders as they're going through those large organizational size changes. And then I'll pass it to Erin to introduce herself.
Thanks. So hi, I'm Erin Maitland. I've been a consultant at Propeller for over 3 years now, and I have more than 7 years experience in change management and have also worked on multiple public sector projects with clients as well as clients across the industry. And the people side of change is something I'm very passionate about, and I'm also part of our people and change practice team alongside Keely at Propeller. So excited to talk to y'all today.
Yes. So with that, we do have a full agenda to walk us through today. We'll also make sure we save time for questions at the end, and then I'll be checking the chat as we go in case you want to kind of chime in with any questions as we go throughout. But ultimately, we want to walk through the basics of what is change saturation, why it's important to talk about and start planning for, especially in today's environment, and then how do we build that resiliency. So we're hoping to give you kind of lots of tools, tactics, and a framework so that you can kind of walk away with, here's how I can apply the learnings from today to my normal role, whether that's change practitioner or project manager, or whatever that kind of area looks like. So to kick this off, we're going to talk about what is change saturation and kind of what that looks like. And we'll start with that. So let me give you a quick definition, and there's definitely different ways to kind of talk through this, but ultimately saturation occurs when the amount of change that's happening exceeds our own ability to adopt and adapt to us, right? So when we've just like a sponge becomes saturated with too much water, it is also possible for us to become saturated with too much change on our plates. This applies to work life or just in general, everything else. But we don't have control over an employee's personal life, but we do kind of have an ability to at least manage and understand what's in front of their work plate, and understand that. Ultimately, change is like focus. And while we can't guarantee that we can control the amount of sponge that or the water that a sponge can hold, we know that it's not efficient. So we're trying to, at least understand what's out there. So to do so, let's kind of, before we kind of walk through tactics, let's talk about how important this is. First and foremost, it's important to understand that change saturation is rising, and that I don't have a magic ball, but if I had to guess, I put big money on the fact that it's not going to slow down, right? Change saturation has increased dramatically just from 2007 to 2019. And while I don't have 2024 numbers, I can kind of guess that that number is going to continue to increase, right? So 59% over 10 years ago, compared to 73% of people reporting that saturation is reaching, like that they've hit their saturation levels when it comes to the amount of changes that are being introduced to them in the workplace. And again, I don't have that crystal ball, but I think it's pretty safe to say that it's not going to slow down, and instead it's probably going to continue to rise as we look at how much change people have on their plates. And in fact, as of right now, employees are facing an average of 10 organizational changes happening at once in front of them. And so if you were to think of either your own personal experience within your own department or just the number of projects that you're trying to help your stakeholders through, you know that there's multiple things. It might be everything from a tech rollout to an organizational change to anything and anywhere in between, right? From small to large. So saturation, we know, is not going to go down. So what can we start to do to look out for it? So let's start by asking, and you can come off mute if you're brave, or I can see the messages in the chat here of when you think of change saturation, what does it show up? What are the signs and symptoms of saturation in the workplace? Within your own projects, departments, organizations.
See that transition and disengagement. So somebody that may have been involved like as a project team member slowly backs away from how they're interacting on the team, or their commentary may change as well as they disengage.
For sure, yeah, that disengagement, that low morale. I like that. Disengagement.
Folks, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, folks openly saying, I can't do one more thing.
Yeah.
I was going to say, we've coined a phrase, change fatigue.
Yep.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
We see a lot of the ignoring and an increase of talk of the way it used to be. So kind of reflecting on the past.
Sure.
Jessica, did you speak or?
I did, yes, thank you.
Okay.
I'm also seeing things in the communication. I like the slowly backing away. I think that kind of goes with the disengagement, the resistance, ignoring emails, communications, just ignoring you plainly. Some bigger ones like higher turnover, disengagement, trust is being eroded, overwhelmed. Yeah, these are all really good. Or the dog chewing the baseboards. Yeah, whatever shows up for you and your organization, but a lot of those. I like these. So I think you covered most of the ones that I had, but just to kind of relap, we're seeing that decreased productivity, we're seeing that fatigue, turnover was brought up, morale and disengagement came up quite a few times, as well as that resistance. Obviously, all of these are really bad for an organization, especially as they're trying to roll out new changes. And sometimes they're good changes and they can have like good benefits, but if we can't get people to engage with us and understand or adopt the changes, then all of this is kind of for a loss. So I think everyone clearly has seen saturation in the workplace. We've all kind of experienced this. So let's kind of walk through ways that we can start to get ahead of it. And the first way to do that is to start to track it and to kind of understand how bad it is, so that we can kind of then predict and kind of react from there. So I think most people agree that an employee or a survey is the gold standard as far as getting that level of data and insight you need into as far as sentiment or levels of burnout and stress. However, surveys often come with that giant asterisk that A, you cannot overload your employees or your stakeholders with surveys. And then also, like, you're going to get low results too. I usually recommend that if you can get 20 to 40% of a population to fill out a survey, that's pretty good. But even if you only have 20%, that's not actually a full picture of how everyone's feeling. So therefore, while surveys are great, you can't use them every week. You probably can barely use them every quarter. So what can you be doing? So that's where it comes to different things that we can be tracking. So obviously, as change managers, we're very aware of a change impact assessment where we're trying to catalog everything that's happening. I also try and encourage you to look beyond just the one or two projects that you're currently working on that you've been tasked and look at the wider project inventory and create that. What I've had a lot of success with is having that change calendar. That allows me to say, okay, hey, we're hitting group A with these 10 changes in Q1 versus group B only got hit with like 5 changes. And the more data, whether that's through that impact assessment, that inventory, or that calendar, that I can then present to my leadership or to my stakeholders and say, hey, we're doing too much in Q1 for this group, the more I'm able to kind of influence decisions. So maybe I can't change the rollout of a tech timeline, but I can say like, hey, we're hitting this group too much. What can we do to kind of alter this? The first way to do that is to have that tracking, to have that data to back you up. So always encourage you to start thinking of what would a calendar look like? What would that inventory look like? Again, beyond just my one survey or beyond just my one project assessment. So always having ways to track it is key because, again, think beyond your project and think to the wider organization because that influences how well you are to, or likely you are to succeed in your own initiative. We'll quickly talk through some key tactics that you can be doing to kind of like, these are small things that you can be doing right away when it comes to addressing that saturation. So you have that calendar, you know what's going on. Anything you can do to group changes together so that you're rolling out similar things at the same time is always a key win. Same thing goes for training. Anything that I can do to group things together. I will never have an option against communication. I'm always over communicate versus under communicate. But at the same time, the more you communicate, the more likely they are to kind of disengage or start ignoring you. So being very thoughtful behind that and grouping those things together. Depending on where you sit within your organization or how your department's set up, having a good understanding of that portfolio management. So again, thinking beyond just my project or my change and thinking of here's everything that's hitting, because that gives you that better understanding of what's going on. All of this allows you to kind of measure and sustain things on the long term. Real quick, there was a question of what recommendations do you have for compiling that change calendar for work initiatives, changes that are taking place division-wide. Yeah, so that's kind of where that lean governance comes in. So if I can create the template of, hey, here's everything that I know that's coming out in February, or here's in March, because we're starting to think of 2025, hopefully, the more I can kind of do this. So if it comes to like your ability to create governance beyond like at that division level. So whether that's you rolling up to your leadership or you're creating some kind of portfolio type group, so you can kind of see that, because this is not just a public sector problem. This happens in all organizations I've ever worked with. We tend to work in our silos. So the more we can kind of do to create some kind of level above that individual silo, so we can start to say, hey, Patricia is going through these 3 changes in Q1 versus Aaron's like rolling out these 4, like the better chance you have of let's kind of like work together and maybe group things or communicate together where we can.
Keely, is there a specific tool you find helpful for compiling that change calendar?
Yeah, Aaron and I actually talked about this when we were making this presentation. We're always subject to the client, which means in whatever tools and processes they use. So I've seen some people get really creative with things like Google Calendar. I also just, for better or for worse, default to my Microsoft products. So having like a PowerPoint was honestly one of the best I'd ever seen, of like a calendar of everything that's happening in this quarter. It was 4 slides and it was super easy to keep updated. And it was honestly the only level of depth that my leadership team was willing to take in. So in that case, having 4 slides I had deeper ones, but those 4 slides was what my leadership team was willing to listen to. And then that's what we're able to use. So it's not fancy, but it worked. Yeah. Okay, so we all know what saturation is. We all talked about it. We've all seen it clearly from those symptoms that we saw in the chat. So let's talk about resiliency and kind of what it is, and then why it's important for us to start like planning for. So resiliency is our ability to absorb that disturbance, to understand how much is coming at us, and then be able to function again at that full ability. In 2 words, it's our ability to bounce back, ultimately. It's how we're going to bounce back from the number of things that are throwing at us so that we can then kind of continue to operate and function well, so that we're not disengaging, we're not having turnover, we're not quitting. We're actually continuing to like accept these changes as they come. And why this is so important is because, as we saw, saturation is not going to slow down, and it has no chances of slowing down probably in the near future. So instead, what I task each of you with, and what we're kind of hoping you walk away with from today, is maybe instead of trying to fight saturation, because it's probably a battle we're not going to win, how can we build an employee base who's more resilient? So what trainings can we do? What kind of engagement can we do so that we're building employees who are able to bounce back from changes at a faster pace? Since again, seems unlikely, especially in public sector and how things quickly move with every election season, let alone just your normal cycle. Like, how do we actually build up that bounce back trait in our employees so that way we can continue to kind of, operate at the speed that we need to. So this should be hopefully pretty obvious. But why do we need resiliency in our organizations? It kind of goes back to all those things that we saw. Ultimately, it increases our adaptability. It reduces risks and like our ability to handle those unexpected challenges. Because as much as my change calendar might be beautiful, I'm always going to forget something, and there's always going to be that unexpected thing that pops up. So we're kind of trying to prepare for the things that we can't prepare for. It improves that engagement, that morale, those signs and symptoms people mentioned. And then ultimately it helps us be more successful, right? So we want our own change initiatives that we're in charge of to have a higher success rate, but we also want everything across the board. So all of this is about how do we build up these traits and capabilities within our organization, within our people, so that we have these better results. Okay, so the why seems hopefully pretty obvious. Let's now focus on some tactics to build that resiliency and hopefully give everyone some key things that they can walk away with today, as well as in the long term for things you can start like fighting for or promoting within your organizational cultures, so that you have this employee base who's super resilient to change, despite everything that's being thrown at them. So the first few, one is fostering a growth mindset. Ultimately, when we think of training and development for a project, we're thinking of how do I train them for this new technology, or how do I communicate them for this new org change? And instead, we want to kind of promote this culture of continuous improvement. And instead of just the training for, the new software, let's think of what trainings are out there for problem solving, having a high EQ and adaptability. So what are those small things that we can be doing to train adaptability or like emotional intelligence outside of just like preparing for the changes right in front of their face? Again, we're trying to build up that resilience muscle. Psych safety is also coming up a lot. I hear about it more and more with the clients that I work with and in some of the trainings that we host. And it's all about creating this safe environment. And the reason being is that, again, I probably don't have control over the fact that there's going to be 10 changes happening in Q1. But what I can kind of try to control is creating a place where people feel safe to talk about it and they can take risks without the fear of negative consequences. And this starts with our leaders. So our leaders have to be willing to talk about it. They have to model this vulnerability and creating that safe space. Psych safety, again, is a very complex project that I think, or problem that you could take hours and hours of training on, but it's a good thing to try to encourage within your organizations, so that people, again, feel they have that safe place within work, so that they know that it's okay. Like, hey, I'm not responding well to change A, but changes B through D, I can, process on my own time. Again, I will never discount communications. I'm always a big comms girl. So anything I can do to provide those regular updates, have those transparent communications, and always tying back to the why is the big thing. So whenever I'm sending a communication, instead of just saying, oh, the more communication, the better, the two questions you should always be asking is, does this communication tie back to the why, to the business, the department, the state level, whatever goal? And then also, does there have a call to action? So if I can't answer those two questions with why I'm sending this comm, then let's rethink it and maybe group it for later or kind of save it with that. All right, a few more for building resilience. Offering support systems. And actually for all of these, I encourage these to happen not just within your individual project or within your individual change, but across the board. So it's very common for us to set up a change network for a project and having that group. What if you had a mentorship program just across the board, right? Or you had those peer networks for all things happening within your department or your division, or maybe even on a smaller level. So things that you can be doing to set up that support group long term and have that resilience long term. We talk about celebrating wins, and I think anyone who's taken AdCard can attach to this. Anything we can do to celebrate those milestones, those small wins, can kind of help us feel engaged or build up those small wins along the way. Because again, if we're talking 10 programs over Q1, let's that's a lot to celebrate just at the end of Q1. So what can we do to celebrate along the way? And then again, this is not just your project, it's overall creating a resilience workforce. So whether that's wellness programs or check-ins, anything you can do to monitor the workload and the stress levels of your groups, so that you have, again, that more resilient effort or more resilient workforce as we talk through this. And then there is a question on the slides. We will be sharing all of these slides afterwards. So anything that's on here, I know I'm going kind of quickly, you will definitely be getting afterwards. But
I think she means the 4 slides for the leadership team, like what you put on those for your kind of, look at the calendar. I think that's what she's referring to.
Oh,
yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. No, it was like literally January, February, March. Here's the calendar was slide 1. And then slide 2 was like Q2 and the 4 months and me listing out by dates, all of the go lives. So, I mean, it was 3 months on one slide was all I did. But it meant that every time I checked in with the steering committee, I was able to pull up those same 3 slides, show what was done and what we had upcoming. And then when new things came up, I put them in like bright yellow of like, hey, do we have ability to change any of these go lives or these dates? Because right now we're putting too much on like group A. And I just like, I feel bad asking them to do that much. So again, like there are fancier tools and I don't know Change Sync, but it's probably great. But sometimes simplest can be best. Any other questions on resiliency? Okay.
So there is a question, who is tasked with applying these concepts related to resiliency? How does change practitioner support managers in these concepts?
Yeah, so we'll have a framework that we'll teach next that we've used as like a how do we up-level our managers so they can better talk about this. Sometimes it is hard in that change manager aspect because we're kind of playing the middle manager of leadership's giving us these tasks and we have to go execute. So it's going to be a mix of how do I up-level my own leadership to talk about these things like resiliency, but then also what tools, resources, frameworks can I provide the people below me or the managers, people actually executing the change so that they can therefore better provide these for their employees. So I'm fully aware that you're kind of in that weird middle ground a lot of times, but it's going to be 2. What can I give resources can I give below? And then also what can I advocate for those like at the leadership level?
Have you seen coordination with like the HR? I'm just trying to think when you're talking about trainings or things, has that been an effective strategy?
Yeah, that's a good question. In some organizations, yes. In other organizations, maybe not so much. It probably depends on the organizational culture and how heavy of a hand HR plays in. If you have a workplace experience team, they usually love to play into this, or an L&D team. This is a good team to target. It depends on your team because sometimes HR only says we only handle legal problems, which is fine. That's HR's job. So like think beyond HR, think about again, like those employee experience, those L&D, or even your executive sponsor if they're receptive to this kind of stuff. All right, with that, I'm going to pass it to Erin, who's going to walk through some of those frameworks that I talked about and kind of hopefully some more tactical tools you can take away.
Thanks, Keely. So like Keely said, I'm going to walk you through first a coaching framework that you as change practitioners can use to effectively guide employees in building greater resilience. But also, again, change practitioners are often in that kind of mid-level space that can be kind of awkward. So this is also a really helpful tool for people managers and leadership. People managers are often who individual employees tend to trust the most, and they're the ones with the closest day-to-day interactions with employees as well. So they really play that crucial role in guiding their teams through change, offering not just practical support, but also some of that emotional reassurance as well. But essentially, this framework provides some useful questions and strategies to help promote growth, adaptability, and resilience. It's a really practical tool designed to help foster employee development and help them navigate challenges in times of change and high change saturation. Looks like we had a question. Psych safety, do you recommend any sort of communication that uses anonymity to keep a speaker from being identified? One thing that I've leveraged a lot in change management planning is ask me anything sessions with leadership, and we would always provide an option for people to ask questions and provide feedback anonymously as well, which we found pretty helpful, especially if you have leaders that are willing to be really transparent in their answers. I don't know if Keely, you have additional thoughts on that one.
Yeah, and I'm sure therapists can correct me on this, but for a truly psychological safe environment, or if you've created that true psychological safe environment, you're not supposed to need anonymity, right? Like it's supposed to be that safe environment where someone from the bottom level feels comfortable speaking up to someone at the top level. We all know that that's a very idealistic situation. So it's being able to advocate for those, which then brings back to Erin's point of like, maybe it's an anonymous survey or some kind of whistleblower. But when it comes to psych safety, it's about creating that culture so that people can kind of feel free to at least speak to hopefully one level above them, maybe not back to the governor, but to somewhere in between. You should have some level, hopefully, of that safe environment. But again, that's like a much deeper topic. It's just something I encourage you to start researching into.
Thanks, Keely. Go to the next slide. So resilience really strengthens when coaching is provided consistently over time, allowing employees to, test, refine, and evaluate different strategies. So by offering that continuous guidance and feedback, you can really create an environment where resilience becomes more of a core strength for both individuals and also teams as a whole. So this coaching framework consists of 3 parts. The first part focuses on identification, so helping the individual develop self-awareness regarding their current responses to different stressors that change introduces. So this involves examining their thoughts, their emotions, also physical reactions to gain more insight into how they typically manage pressure. And then the second part emphasizes evaluation, where you're guiding individuals in assessing the helpfulness or effectiveness of their current coping strategies. They should be reflecting on whether the strategies that they're using align with their values and their goals, while also, recognizing which behaviors tend to be constructive and which might be hindering some of their progress. And then the third is adaptation, where you collaborate with the individual to explore and experiment with new strategies for managing future changes and challenges. And really the emphasis here is on building their confidence in applying these new strategies in real life situations, which will then help strengthen their resilience and their adaptability. So we'll quickly look at some questions that you might ask team members for each part of the framework, or encourage people managers and leadership to ask these types of questions. I'm not going to read out every question, but I'll certainly talk about the goals behind them. And then one caveat I'll give is that these questions are certainly suggestions. So I would say feel free to adjust or add to these based on the flow of the conversations and also the individual needs of each person. They're not prescriptive by any means. Next slide. Great. So when guiding people to identify stressors and develop that self-awareness, you'll want to start asking questions to encourage individuals to reflect deeply on their experiences. And this will promote a better understanding of their reactions to difficult or certain situations that change typically introduces. So by helping them explore, their thoughts, their actions, and their feelings, You or people managers can lead them to uncover some patterns in their behavior and gain more insight into how these factors are impacting their performance and also their decision making. So that self-awareness piece is a really critical first step in developing some of those effective coping strategies and strengthening their overall resilience in the face of challenges, especially if they're in an environment with high change saturation, which is often most of the time. So, for example, by reflecting on a recent change, like maybe it was an org restructuring, an employee might recognize that they felt really overwhelmed and anxious, and that led them to avoid seeking clarification, and then they ended up feeling more disconnected from their team. So that awareness then helps them understand the types of situations that trigger their stress and then how their typical reactions impact their experience moving forward. And then from there, you can discuss how their thoughts and their feelings affected their ability to achieve their goals. And then you can work together to develop some coping strategies, like maybe clarifying project goals to reduce uncertainty, talking about the why behind it, like Keely mentioned, or encouraging them to do exercises like practicing mindfulness to reduce their anxiety. So these steps can empower them to handle their stress more effectively, improve their performance, and then build that resilience for future changes. So that brings us to evaluation. So in that evaluation phase, you should be helping individuals assess the helpfulness of their current coping strategies. So when people take the time to think about how they've acted or responded in certain situations, they can identify which of their actions or strategies were helpful and which ones weren't. So which ones, might have helped them achieve their goals and which ones might have hindered their progress. And so by doing this, they learn more about their own ability to handle challenges, or what we'd call their personal resilience. Essentially, reflecting on their past experiences helps them understand how well they typically bounce back again from difficulties. So, for instance, an employee who might isolate themselves during the rollout of a change initiative may realize through some of these questions that avoiding collaboration increases their anxiety and confusion. They may learn that actually reaching out to colleagues for support could enhance their understanding and reduce their stress. And that would highlight the importance of them using communication as a tool. So this evaluation piece and these questions not only deepen their understanding of their coping processes, but it also equips them with some practical knowledge and skills to increase resilience in similar situations moving forward. So that brings us to the adaptation phase. As you work with individuals to explore new strategies for handling stressors, it's important to encourage them to visualize how these strategies could be applied in real life situations, not just in theory. We want them to actually try these out. So by discussing specific scenarios, they can brainstorm ways to improve their coping strategies to better handle similar challenges in the future. For example, an employee who struggles with time management during change might brainstorm ways to better prioritize tasks and incorporate regular check-ins to stay on track. Also helping them to identify some available resources like mentorship programs like Healy mentioned, or relevant courses to strengthen their resilience, their critical thinking, can provide a framework for them to develop more of that knowledge and skills to ensure that they have those necessary tools to implement the new approaches. And then additionally, discussing accountability. Again, we actually want them to try these out. So something like scheduling follow-up meetings could, or having a buddy, something like that could reinforce their commitment to trying these strategies. But overall, this collaborative process driven by the coaching framework and guiding questions helps build resilience to change for people in both the workplace and also potentially in their personal lives as well. Some of the coping mechanisms can kind of transfer from work to personal life and relate to both. But really building that resilience muscle helps reduce the risks of negative impacts of change saturation, which again is often unavoidable and continuing to increase. You saw the numbers that Keely shared. It's certainly not something that's going away. Slide. Oh, I think we maybe missed a slide. That's okay. We do have a table in this deck that has all of the questions. There it is. So this slide just consolidates the coaching framework and questions in one place for easy reference, and it is a great tool to have in your toolkit. And it's great for both, again, change practitioners and people managers. And again, you'll have access to this deck for you to leverage for your reference. And remember, you can modify and expand upon these questions based on the specific individual needs, the conversation flow in the situation. Are there any questions on this framework? All right. So earlier, Keely walked you through some various change management tactics to help build resilience. So I want to briefly explore how you might apply some of the tactics she mentioned at each stage of your change plan using the ADKAR framework. Many of you are likely very familiar with the ADKAR model, but for those of you who aren't or maybe need a little refresher, here's just a really quick rundown of it. ADKAR is a very straightforward, goal-oriented model for managing change. It was developed by ProSci, and it focuses on 5 essential steps that help both individuals and organizations navigate change successfully. So first, awareness. It's crucial to understand why the change is happening in the first place. We've talked about that quite a bit. Without this clarity, it's really hard for anybody to get on board with the change. So the goal here is to make sure everybody knows why the change is necessary and also, what's at stake if nothing changes. And then we move on to desire. Now that people know why the change is happening, it's about building the motivation to support it. People need to feel personally invested in the change. So it's about finding ways to make them want to be part of it. And then next is knowledge. With that motivation already in place, it's time to focus on the how. People need to learn what they need to do and how they can make the change work in practice. This is where, training and information really come into play. And then after that, we focus on ability. This is where people actually develop the skills they need to execute the change. It's not enough to know what needs to be done and have the knowledge. They have to actually be able to do it, which is often involving, practice, support, and hands-on experience. I kind of think of that one as, you can know the rules of basketball or a certain sport, but are you actually able to play it? Possibly not. And then finally, there's reinforcement. Change doesn't stick without ongoing effort. This step is all about making sure the new behaviors and practices are sustained. So really here, recognition, feedback, and support help keep the change in place over time. So together, those 5 steps of the ADKAR model help individuals and organizations effectively manage and embrace change, particularly in times of high change saturation. So now I'll just dive into applying some tactics to build resilience into each phase of the ADKAR model. So awareness helps reduce uncertainty, which is a really key aspect of resilience by ensuring that everybody understands the reasons for the change and feels grounded in a clear purpose. I would say transparency is very critical here. And so to promote resilience through the awareness phase during a change initiative, try to facilitate some discussions that explore the reasons behind the change and encourage some team reflection on past changes and also lessons learned about strengthening their resilience. And then keeping the team informed also about some relevant trends can add some important context for change and help people see the bigger picture. Next slide. And then desire fosters resilience by building personal motivation and engagement, empowering individuals to view that change more as an opportunity rather than a threat. So to develop resilience through the desire stage, really try to emphasize those personal benefits that the changes offer. These could be things like opportunities for skill development, or maybe talk about how the solution will save time and improve efficiency, allowing employees to focus on more meaningful work that they're passionate about and more time for innovation. Encourage the team to recognize how the change aligns with their core values or the company's core values, like growth, continuous improvement, and reinforcing the relevance of it to their goals. And additionally, it's important to create an environment where, again, team members feel safe to voice their concerns and seek support. That really ties back into that psychological safety piece that we were discussing, which is absolutely, critical for building resilience. Next. And then knowledge builds resilience by equipping individuals with those tools and understanding that they need to feel confident and capable in navigating the change. So empower your team and encourage your leaders to empower their teams to take ownership of their learning and their growth, really cultivating that growth mindset by reinforcing the belief that they can learn new skills, even if it feels challenging initially. Everyone goes through their change curve. And remember, resilience grows when team members are viewing those challenges as opportunities for development as opposed to obstacles. Also try to guide the team to break down learning into more manageable steps. This approach helps prevent people from getting overwhelmed and stressed, and builds resilience by allowing individuals to tackle changes in smaller, more achievable increments. So, for example, you could break down learning of a new software tool into short daily exercises, so it's a little less daunting. And then, as Keely was talking about earlier, providing training and development programs that build resilience related skills like problem solving, emotional intelligence, and adaptability are also very essential, in addition to training that's directly related to the change. So some of those skills related to resiliency, in addition to training for the change and the changes itself. Okay. And then adaptability strengthens resilience by providing opportunities to practice and refine new skills, transforming challenges into moments of growth and capability. So to strengthen resilience through ability, we focus on creating a supportive environment where the team can build and apply new skills confidently. So wherever you can, try to create some low pressure opportunities for practicing these new skills, and encourage some constructive feedback among team members to boost their performance and their confidence. You can offer something like role-playing exercises to help employees practice using the system or the processes or whatever the new change is. And additionally, foster collaboration by connecting individuals going through the change, enabling them to support each other and creating that support network. So when people share their experiences and challenges, they often realize, they're not alone in facing the difficulties, and you're really building that strong support system. And this sense of community can really reduce those feelings of isolation and anxiety. Slide. All right, and then finally, reinforcement enhances resilience by embedding those new habits and celebrating progress, creating a sense of stability and confidence in adapting to future changes. So here, focus on sustaining the change and building that long-term adaptability. Encourage the team to adopt new habits that seamlessly integrate the change into their daily routines and recognize their progress by celebrating even the smallest achievements. And that keeps motivation high. Like Keely mentioned, you don't need to, wait till the end of the quarter to celebrate achievements. You can celebrate achievements along the way to keep that motivation up. As we discussed earlier, building those incremental wins is really important. And then encourage a culture of continuing peer support, again, by inviting team members to assist those who might be having more difficulty with the change. And then that also strengthens and reinforces their own understanding of the processes. Typically, when you teach something to somebody else, that reinforces your own understanding. So overall, you've likely used many of these tactics before as change practitioners, as they're just effective and proven best practices for change management, but they also do directly support building resilience in your team. So also applying them within the ADKAR framework helps create an environment where everybody can adapt and successfully navigate change, strengthening their resilience even in those times of high change saturation. So are there any questions on this piece? Let's see. I think there were some questions I might have missed in here. Building and reinforcement tips are owned and implemented by the team, direct manager. Many managers stop at go live without follow through. Yep, that is one of the biggest challenges. I think the reinforcement piece is, and the sustainability is one of the pieces that gets missed the most. Everybody thinks once there's a go live, it's you're done with the change, you can move on. You can certainly move on to the next. But people, even if they are learning the new processes and doing well in the new processes, without the proper tactics to reinforce it, people can actually regress and move back into old habits as well.
Do you have any thoughts on how to integrate more of that reinforcement within the culture versus that kind of project by project to help from running into that crux?
I think a lot of it, one thing that helps is first coaching your leaders and people managers on the importance of the reinforcement. Again, they're the ones that are going to be closest to the employees going through the change. So making sure that they know that, change management is actually, a part of their job and supporting their people through change, and coaching them on effective tactics in reinforcing it within their teams. Also, if you have like an organizational kind of wide communication plan, ingraining it in something like that, newsletters, things like that are helpful as well. It's definitely a challenging muscle to build within the organization, but I typically start with coaching leadership. Keely, do you have any thoughts on that one?
No, I agree. And I was going to say is continue those communications post-launch of like, here's where the help resources are, here's where the additional trainings are, here's where we can continue to find support, because it's not going to stop. So yes, maybe it's owned by the direct manager, but maybe there's ways you can continue to build that.
I think of reflecting on previous changes and highlighting successes in the awareness stage. Yes, this is a something that's a big one too. If people have positive experiences with past change too, they're more likely to embrace future change. And if they have negative experiences with past change, they're likely to go into future changes with more of a negative attitude. So actively discussing, how previous changes went and highlighting those successes and having conversations around those will help with resiliency and creating a more positive mindset for future changes. Great point.
Any other questions from the whole topic of today? All right, well, again, we will make sure that these slides get shared. But thank you for the time this morning, and hopefully we're able to give you something that you can walk away with and apply, whether it's on saturation, resilience, or tactics that you can be taking within frameworks or ADCAR, whatever the case is. But with that, I know there's some final slides.
Wonderful. Keely and Erin, thank you so much for presenting today. We learned a lot. I know we were engaged with our community practice, so we're so excited to have you. Before everybody hops off, just make sure that if you do need to do your PDUs, Patricia will put the link in the chat so you can get your PDUs filled out that way. And just a reminder, if you go to our website, that's where the slide deck and the recording will be held there. And a LinkedIn group will also post it there as well. And then you can get directly to the recording on our YouTube channel. So you can find all that information so you can have the resource in the future as well when those are available. I believe Corey will probably do it next week. And don't forget, we do have a webinar survey. So provide your feedback on the presentation today, how we can prepare for 2025. And we also included the GoFundMe link as well. So please support us in our nonprofit endeavors in 2025. And with that, happy holidays. Have a wonderful new year, and we will see you in February. All right. Bye, everybody.